9. Allison Smith. Allison Smith worked as a financial manager in Wales at her family-owned company Ear & Civil Engineering for 9 years. After she quit in 2022, another employee took over her accounting duties and discovered thousands of dollars in suspicious payments. It soon became clear that Smith had funneled copious amounts of the company's money into her personal bank account, while disguising the transfers as bill payments to suppliers that the company worked with. She did this the entire time she worked there, amounting to nearly £1,315,143, $1.5 million in stolen funds. Smith's co-workers noticed that she had an exceptionally lavish lifestyle for someone who made a very average salary of just under $39,000 per year, £32,000. However, they trusted her, so they didn't question how she could afford expensive vacations, cars, clothing, and home renovations. She also kept the attention focused away from her shady activity by manipulating her fellow employees. She turned them against each other in an effort to discredit anyone she saw as a potential threat to discovering or exposing her theft. In court, Smith's attorney argued that his client struggled with a severe gambling addiction after a few promising bingo and slot machine wins caused her to get in over her head. He also claimed that Smith misused alcohol to cope with the guilt she felt over her fraud. The judge said that Smith stole a life-changing amount of money from her family regardless of how she spent it, and that she seemed to feel just as sorry for herself as she did for any of the people she hurt. In the end, he sentenced her to 5 years, including 2.5 years spent in prison and the rest on supervised release. 8. Sarah Gonzalez McLean. Police in Lawrence, Kansas walked into a horror scene one day in 2014 when they discovered the brutally murdered body of 52-year-old pizzeria owner Harold Sasko. The victim was bound with zip ties and nearly decapitated, and the word "freedom" was written on the wall in his blood. Sasko's car was missing along with his roommate and employee 19-year-old Sarah Gonzalez McLean, who worked as a waitress at one of his pizzerias. Police initially thought someone had kidnapped her, but the young woman soon became a suspect and was apprehended in Miami. Gonzalez McLean admitted to killing Sasko and described how she'd meticulously planned it out ahead of time. She drugged him and said she had second thoughts about following through with the murder after he fell unconscious, but ultimately finished the job. Her lawyers argued for reduced responsibility for the crime based on her mental health, claiming she suffered from multiple personality disorder, addiction, and childhood trauma. The jury nevertheless convicted Gonzalez McLean of first-degree murder and sentenced her to serve 50 years to life in prison. In 2021, the court reduced her sentence to 25 years to life. Sarah's crime was undeniably horrific, but there are at least two sides to every story. In an opinion piece for the Kansas Reflector, her mother, Michelle Gonzalez, described Sasko as an abuser who routinely pushed himself on Sarah. She claims that the man frequently disrespected her daughter and made her feel financially trapped. Gonzalez acknowledged her daughter's actions, but thinks she deserves a new trial that would allow her to address the alleged abuse. And while Sasko's loved ones say he would never mistreat someone, the unfortunate truth is that only 2 people will ever know what went on in that household, and one of them is dead. 7. Diabolical Daycare. A small town in Mississippi that most people have never even heard of landed on national news radar in October 2022, when footage of daycare employees terrorizing children with horror masks went viral. The incident happened at the Little Blessings Daycare in Hamilton, and the case involved 4 workers who used scary masks to discipline the kids they were trusted to take care of. In one video, an employee wearing a mask from the movie Scream growls and screams at a group of children who appear to be no more than 3 or 4 years old. The kids were understandably frightened, and they can be heard screaming in terror. Another clip shows a masked worker asking a little boy if he was behaving and if they needed to take him out back. The employee then growls at the child as he cries. The video sparked outrage among both the community and the country. Authorities charged Sierra McCandless, Okiana Kilburn, Jennifer Newman, and Cheyenne Shelton with 3 counts of felony child abuse each. A 5th suspect, mandatory reporter Tracy Hudson, was also charged with failing to report abuse and simple assault against a minor. The daycare's owner, Sheila Sanders, said that she was unaware of the employee's misconduct, which was captured on video on 2 separate occasions. She wasn't accused of any wrongdoing and fired the workers, but is still suffering the effects of their behavior as her license remains suspended amid an ongoing investigation. 6. Lloyd Love Jr. 35-year-old Lloyd Love Jr. was less than a week into his new job as a security guard in Aurora, Colorado in 2022 when he was unable to cash his $165 paycheck because his name was misspelled on it. He ripped up the check and confronted his boss, 52-year-old Marvin Johnson, and Johnson's wife. Marvin was in the middle of asking his wife to issue a new check when the disgruntled new hire allegedly shot him in the head. He then had his girlfriend pick him up and wouldn't tell her what happened, but said that he did something stupid. Love is now facing a first-degree murder charge, but his sister Tiffany said that the crime never would have happened if the authorities hadn't released him from custody months earlier when he was arrested for assaulting her. He was originally held on $25,000 bond, which would have kept him locked up according to his sister, who said that her brother was homeless and had no way to come up with that amount of money. But Love's defense attorney convinced the judge to release him without bail. Tiffany told local station KDVR that she begged the court not to let him out of jail because she feared he might seriously harm someone. She said that he suffered from untreated mental health issues, including schizophrenia. Love's ex-wife, Lisa Terriot, said that she also couldn't understand why he was free to commit the crime he's being accused of, which cost an innocent person their life. 5. Jason Duheim. In October 2022, police launched a massive response to a claim that a package had exploded at Northeastern University in Boston. The caller said that sharp objects had blasted out of a Pelican case and up his sleeves, injuring his arms. He also claimed that the case contained a violent note. However, when officers arrived at the alleged scene of the crime, the details didn't add up. The case that supposedly exploded was empty and undamaged, and there was no evidence that it had been exposed to an explosive device. They also didn't find any threatening notes in the case. The administrator who called 911 to report the blast, 45-year-old Jason Duheim, was treated at the hospital for a minor wound. But authorities noted that his injuries were inconsistent with what they would expect to see in the type of explosion Duheim described. A search of the administrator's work computer turned up a copy of the so-called threatening note, along with evidence that it was written and printed earlier that day. While the exact details of the note are unclear, law enforcement described it as a rambling piece about virtual reality and Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Duheim was charged with intentionally conveying misleading information related to an explosive device and for making false statements to a federal law enforcement agency. Each charge carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years and a fine of up to $250,000. He maintains his innocence and is out on bail while his case works its way through the court system, but he's no longer employed by Northeastern University. 4. Stephen Lancaster Dennis. While working as a money processing manager for Brinks in Alabama, 49-year-old Stephen Lancaster Dennis had access to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's coin inventory. During an audit in 2014, authorities discovered that nearly $200,000 worth of quarters had been replaced with beads. They found evidence that Dennis stole the 784,000 missing quarters over the span of a month, and that he came in on his day off to fill 4 empty ballistic bags with beads. For the crime, he was federally charged with bank theft. In the meantime, Brinks was held responsible for paying back the Federal Reserve. Dennis ended up taking a deal and pleaded guilty to the charge. As part of the agreement, he was fined $250,000 and was ordered to pay Brinks back since they'd already reimbursed the Federal Reserve. He also faced up to 10 years in prison for the crime. However, the last updates on the case were in 2016, and it's unclear if he ever served any time for the theft. In a statement, Roger C. Stanton, FBI special agent in charge, said that while Dennis may have thought he was committing a nickel and dime theft, his actions were the equivalent of a major bank heist. 3. Kempton Bonds. A newlywed bride and groom were celebrating their vows with friends and family at a park in Fairfax County, Virginia in 2016, when an employee working the event, 19-year-old Kempton Bonds, cut the electricity. He phoned the police a little while later to make a noise complaint. When officers arrived, it seemed like the matter was resolved, so they left the scene. Bonds would later say that he was frustrated with partygoers for allegedly disobeying the park's policies. Later that evening, he saw the wedding's caterer, 35-year-old Tyon Johns, packing some chairs into a truck and told her that they belonged to the park. The two argued and it ended with Johns dying from a stab wound to the chest. Bonds claimed he stabbed Johns in self-defense, but he was still charged with murder. The first case ended in a mistrial. During his retrial, he said that Johns wrapped her hands around his throat, leaving him unable to breathe when he resorted to using his pocket knife on her. He also pointed out how he immediately dialed 911 to report the incident and maintained a straight story about what happened from day one, indicating that he had nothing to hide. Bonds also presented video and audio evidence of the confrontation. The recording revealed the partygoers hurled insults at him and threatened him for several minutes leading up to the incident. The video proved that he was choked by the woman, and immediately after stabbing Johns, Bonds could be heard repeatedly warning her to stay away from him. In the end, he was found not guilty and walked free without any convictions. Johns' family and friends stand by their belief that she was the true victim and that Bonds got away with murder. 2. William Morris. When a co-worker touched him on the back without his permission, FedEx employee William Morris allegedly went off the rails. He was working at one of the company's facilities in Memphis, Tennessee late at night in 2022 when the incident took place. Jalen Hamilton was walking to his car when Morris reportedly drove up next to him and pointed a gun in his direction, threatening to shoot. According to police reports, Morris then got out of his vehicle and approached Hamilton before firing a shot into the man's abdomen. Not too long after, the victim was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Security guards confirmed to police that Morris was an employee and that he'd recently scanned his ID badge. He was consequently charged with attempted first-degree murder and a gun-related offense, with his bond being set at $250,000. While it wasn't confirmed in the articles regarding the incident, it's likely safe to assume that he no longer works for FedEx. 1. Problematic postal carriers. In 2018, the U.S. Postal Service received a tip about a vehicle parked in Brooklyn, New York with a suspicious amount of mail inside. Agents traced the SUV to Alexei Jamash, a 53-year-old employee who lived nearby. Inside his SUV, they found 20 bags containing around 10,000 pieces of undelivered mail. Another 6,000 parcels were found in Jamash's apartment, along with 1,000 pieces in his work locker. Some of the mail dated back as far as 2005. Jamash reportedly told investigators that he became overwhelmed with the amount of mail he was required to deliver, so he hoarded some of it. He apparently reassured the detectives that he made sure to deliver the important mail. In the end, authorities charged him with detaining and delaying mail. Things like this unfortunately seem to happen more often than most people would like to think. In 2014, another mailman from Brooklyn, Joseph Brucato, was caught hoarding 40,000 pieces of mail. It was reported that investigators seized 2,500 pounds of mail from his apartment. Brucato blamed the hoarding on personal issues, including depression and alcohol abuse. That same year, former postal employee Jeffrey Shipley pleaded guilty to hoarding and destroying mail over a 9-year period at his home in Maryland. A search warrant yielded over 20,000 parcels of mail, including gift cards, credit cards, prescription medications, passports, immigration documents, clothing, and more. He took a plea deal in exchange for a maximum sentence of 5 years and a fine of up to $250,000, which seems to be the standard punishment in these types of cases. These are just a few of the alarming number of cases in recent years, which are mostly attributed to letter carriers feeling overwhelmed by their workload, but sometimes they're motivated by greed. Would you rather work alongside someone who's efficient but always seems like they're on the brink of going off the rails, or an extremely likable person who just can't seem to do the job right? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!